Yeah.
Well, everyone's gone quiet, so you probably...
Good morning, everyone. I think it's 9 o'clock, and the room's gone quiet. We'll make a start. I think there might be a few still to arrive, but we'll make a start. We're doing our breakfast briefing today. Nicely organised by the marketing team. They're kind of at the back there. We've got a bit closer relationship with our marketing team than the the government do with the OBR. So there weren't any leaks this morning, we're glad to say, of the presentation. So my name's Chaz Colsting. I'm the Corporate Finance Director at Jerem's. I do help owners sell their businesses and help other businesses buy other businesses, also help with funding. I've got Kate Moon sitting to the left of me here, who is expert in personal tax and deals with trusts and IHT planning, amongst other things. I've got Nick Wright as well here, who's a corporate tax expert and does a lot of funky corporate tax restructuring and planning and things like that, but all very legitimate. So, and we've got Jamie Ellis at the end there, who's in our financial planning team, and helps deal with helps clients with their wealth and how to manage that. I'm sure kind of just a brief intro of who we are. So today, I know I've got a microphone, but and we will have a microphone, but we're going to make this a bit more conversational. So if any of you want to interject at any point, just raise your hand or shout up or whatever. Try not to heckle too much if you can help it. So I'm probably the least technical tax person here. So just opening up maybe with a bit of background, a bit of kind of economics to, I guess, background to the budget, and guess why Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, decided she needed to do the things she needed to do in the budget. This budget's been interesting, or in a number of ways in the media. The lead up to it's been very well covered by the media, let's say. There's been this new technique that's kind of come in, I suppose from the previous government, started it to a degree of kind of leaking ideas about changes to the budget, see what will stick and what will fly. But it almost got to a stage now where it was almost too much. There was almost too much speculation and leaks before the budget.
Over a long time as well.
And over a long time. And really, is that great for investor confidence in the UK? People wanting to invest in the UK? Does it bring stability? No, I think, perhaps maybe we should be going back to budgets of old where everyone's lips were sealed into a budget day, and then the budget was delivered. But after all the speculation, the budget itself probably lacked kind of major key headlines, but I won't steal any thunder. So I guess the theme of the budget was, I suppose, tax raising again. So Rachel Reeves, having raised tax in a previous budget, needed to come back and raise tax again. And I guess why was that? Was it complete incompetence, or was it a fact of the UK economy in the market? And I think the answer is both, really. So.
Let's not get political.
So I'll start with the marketplace. So I guess there's a graph up here. Sorry, I will stand. Which shows kind of our GDP to debt ratio, which this doesn't look very good. It kind of says, well, actually, up to the financial crisis, we were well under 40%, and since the financial crisis, it's gone up, and then COVID, it's gone up again, and we're running at about 100% of GDP to debt ratio. Now, obviously, doesn't look very good, but actually, to kind of put it into context, the graph actually on the far right there actually puts it into context over kind of a longer term period. So, yes, the fact that we've got a high debt percentage at the moment isn't great, but actually, it's a lot less than it has been in the past. So. World War I and World War II were big increases in the national debt because we had to fund two very big wars. But I guess the positives we can take from that is, the post-war period, we were able to bring that debt ratio back down through probably mainly through growth, really, rather than actually probably paying off the debt. I guess that does give some confidence that it can be done again. And then at the bottom right, if probably can't see it too well, but we've got kind of debt to GDP ratios of different countries. So we've got Denmark here, who are doing pretty well. We've got UK pretty much in the middle, and we've got Japan at a whopping 250% of their debt to GDP ratio. So, in terms of, and the US actually is about 100 and 120%. So, we're not, compared to other countries in the world, we're not doing too bad. I think what the difficulty that the Chancellor's had is actually that the bond markets and the yields on government debt's actually been increasing. And that's been driven by a number of things. So the Bank of England have continued to do what was termed quantitative tightening. So during sort of the pandemic and everything, they helped to fund that through kind of basically buying government bonds, what we call quantitative easing. And now they're trying to kind of place some of those back into the financial markets, which is causing the prices to fall and yields to go up. And therefore sort of the amount of interest that the government has to pay up as well. So that's obviously kind of squeezing the fiscal headroom that Rachel Reeves has to play with. Also, the OBR, who do the forecasts for the budget, have also decided now is a good time to revise their productivity growth forecast. Now, probably for the last 10 years, they've got it wrong. So they've forecast that we're going to be, productivity growth is going to be like this. And actually, since the financial crash, more or less, productivity growth has been pretty flat line. So they've got it wrong for at least best part of 10 years, and they decided that, we're going to now revise that. So the timing for Rachel Reeves on that front, not great. But also, I suppose in the last budget that Rachel Reeves had, it was her first budget. It was probably the time to create as much headroom as possible in a fiscal headroom as possible. She didn't leave herself much headroom at all in her first budget. That first budget was a chance to make all the hard decisions, hard choices, and she obviously did make a few, but she only left herself £10 billion of fiscal headroom. So with all these factors in play, then she's left again, with another black hole, as she describes it. And so that's why we've been left in the position where she's had to kind of, find some money somehow, and she's chosen, on the whole, to raise taxes rather than cut spending. It's fair to say that this time, I think, the fiscal headroom that she's being forecast has increased to, about 22 to 24 billion in a few years' time. So she is building that level of headroom, but it's not at the level of headroom that, say, George Osborne had when he came in, and he built a buffer of about 50 billion at that time. So the extra headroom does kind of help with investor confidence in the UK, because with that extra headroom, if there's headwinds in the market and everything, then that she's probably not going to have to tinker again too much with future budgets to kind of build that headroom. So the more headroom you have, probably the more confidence you have in investment in the UK. So I think that's largely me. I think the real tax experts sitting to my left here, so I'll let them start. But because I work in M&A, the only tax that really kind of impacts us is what we call capital gains when business owners sell their businesses. And as far as we can tell, there's no real changes in the budget to yesterday that was announced that change anything to that. But just one thing to bear in mind for, I guess, clients is business asset disposal relief. So for the first £1 million of consideration that you get from selling your business, you get this relief. And that is, from the last budget, is currently at 14%. That will be increasing to 18% come April 26. So, if you are in the process of disposing of a company, it would be worth trying to get it done before then if you are eligible for business asset disposal relief. And that's me. So, and move on to Kate.
Good morning. So my name's Kate. I'm the tax director at Jerram's. I've probably bored most of you in the room at some point on inheritance tax. I think inheritance tax was probably the area a lot of people were expecting to see in the budget. Certainly we were. Not much has changed in that, and actually the changes that are in there are quite positive. I will come on to inheritance tax a bit further down because I think that's quite a big topic. Not much has changed on the personal tax front. The allowances have been frozen, so all the thresholds and the higher rate allowances and personal allowances were all frozen till 2028 anyway. That has been extended till 2031. So they estimate that another 1 million taxpayers will be in the higher rate tax threshold. So that higher rate tax threshold now is sat at this 50,270 for many years. Obviously cost of living, wages going up, everyone's earning more because you have to earn more to afford to live. So a lot of people are starting to fall into that higher rate tax threshold now. So that's clearly where the government see you as a high earner, which is a little bit concerning because it's not that much of a high wage really in today's world that we live in. So we've got until 2031 now with them thresholds. So that squeeze on higher rates is going to impact everyone. 2% increase on the tax rates for dividends is probably of concern for most of you in this room, I imagine. So the basic rate and the higher rate of tax are going up by 2% on dividends. Interestingly, not the additional rate, which we can't quite work out why, because it has for other income, but just not for dividends. We can only imagine it is because it would push it over 40%, and they perhaps want to keep some sort of illustration as to dividends being less than 40%. So everyone will see a 2% increase on their dividends. I believe that's from April 27. One document said 27, one document said 28. So we'll have to wait for the detail on that really to confirm, but I think it's 2027. Also an extra 2% to the basic rate, higher rate and additional rate for property income and savings income. So that's really targeting investors and landlords. We were expecting to see, there was lots of rumours about 2% increase to basic rate for everything and then a reduction to national insurance so that it kept employees out of the loop. They haven't done that, they've just targeted certain income streams. For landlords, that will definitely be a bit of a blow. Over the last 5 years, a lot of reliefs for landlords have disappeared. You can't claim all your finance costs anymore. It's becoming less and less attractive, and I think with the increase in capital gains tax as well, actually, unless you're in it for the long haul with a rental property or you're getting a really good return on your investment, you're going to see a lot of landlords just selling their properties and cutting their losses at this point because the red tape of being a landlord is horrendous, and now the tax side of it seems to be following suit, and I can only see that getting worse as well. They really don't like this private landlord sector at all. So they're the main tax headlines. Personal tax wise, it was fairly quiet on that front. So minimum wage also going up in April. Not a huge amount, but it's just worth noting that because the national insurance thresholds have been frozen till 2031, every time that minimum wage allowance goes up, if you're a business that has perhaps got younger employees or trainees that are on minimum wage, your wage cost is going up, but so is your national insurance exposure as well. So it's not just that increase that's going to hit you, it's also the NI cost on that because you're not getting any movement in their national insurance allowances. Mileage on electric cars, so they're introducing a new tax on electric cars. So how they're going to do this, we had great debate about it yesterday, how they're going to do it, whether it's going to be
Big Brother.
Whether it's going to be a chip in your car or no idea, but 3p a mile for electric cars, 1.5p, again, don't know how they're going to collect half a pence, but 1.5p per mile for hybrid cars from April 28. Not much change otherwise on cars. I think there's some changes to capital allowances, which you're going to cover, aren't you? And that's really it on the income tax side of things. So there's not a great deal for me to talk about. In terms of inheritance tax, I know that's quite a hot topic at the moment. Certainly a lot of the feedback we got prior to this was what people wanted to hear about, really. So although there wasn't many changes in this budget, I'm just going to sort of run through quickly what happened in last October's budget, because I think that was quite a big change for people. So previously, if you had a trading business or a farming business that qualified for agricultural relief, you could get what's called business relief or agricultural relief, which meant that that asset was exempt from inheritance tax when you died. We've always, build up your business because that's IHT free. We've always promoted that, really. And then last October, what they introduced was this restriction to £1 million per shareholder, if you like. So per person that dies in your estate, up to £1 million worth of value if it's a qualifying asset, which most trading companies are. Doesn't include property companies, but most trading companies should qualify. And you would have £1 million worth of share value passing through probate with no inheritance tax. And then anything over and above that, effectively you'll have a 20% rate of inheritance tax. So whilst it's not the full 40%, actually if you've got an asset that's worth 5 million, previously and up to April 2026, I'm not suggesting that anyone try and die before then, but up to April 2026 there would be no inheritance tax and that would just pass through your estate. After April 2026 it's going to be £1 million IHT free and then a 20% rate on the excess. So we've been doing lots of planning around that to try and see what we can do to make that more efficient. Nick does weird and wonderful things with...
Stop calling my stuff.
Well, it is a bit weird. Weird and wonderful things with freezer shares and growth shares, where we can try and cap your shareholdings to this £1 million value and pass the other wealth on. So we do lots of planning around that. What has changed in this budget is previously they were suggesting that if you had, say, a husband and wife and you each had £1 million worth of assets each, when the first person died, they would pass to the spouse with no IHT because the spouse is exempt. But on that spouse's death, they would still only get a £1 million allowance, not the allowance from the person that had died beforehand. They have now, thank God, confirmed that that is not the case. And actually, if you're passing assets to your spouse and they haven't used their allowance, you will get the benefit of that. So that's currently how it works with the nil rate band. If your spouse dies and leaves everything to you, you get 2 nil rate bands on your death. That will be the same for business relief and agricultural property relief. So rather than only getting £1 million worth of exemption, you will get £2 million worth. So that was quite an important change that they confirmed. So it's good to see that come in. We have been talking about whether, if you've got qualifying assets, should you be leaving them to the next generation rather than your spouse to try and avoid this sort of double hit? And that's not going to be necessary now. So it's good to see that coming in. Lots of planning we can do around inheritance tax, trusts, like I say, freezer shares, growth shares, family companies, family investment companies, restructuring shares. Even gifting, we were expecting to see the survival period extended from 7 years to 10 years. They haven't done that. Whether they will in the future, I don't know, but they can't apply it retrospectively. So it's still quite an interesting topic as to whether or not you can gift anything now. But it has to be something that you're fully prepared to gift. And obviously no one knows how long they're going to live, so you don't want to deprive yourself, but if you've got excess assets that you don't actually need and it wouldn't matter to you if you never saw any income from them, that's a prime time for gifting, whether that's outright gifting or using trusts. I have left my cards dotted around just in case. It's such a big topic, in case anyone wants to give me a call just to have a quick chat about their situation, and we can either point you in the right direction or do some planning, or perhaps tell you that actually you haven't got an issue anyway. But it's nice to have that peace of mind sometimes, I think, around inheritance tax. So happy to speak to anyone, really, have a chat about it. And that's all there is on income tax, really. There's not a great deal, I'm afraid. So a pleasant surprise, I think. I think we all expected a lot worse. So I shall hand you over to Nick. No, Jamie. Sorry, Jamie.
So My name is Jamie Ellis. I'm part of the financial planning team at Jerram's Financial Planning, and I'm an independent financial advisor. So what does that mean? Really, especially working at Jerram's, we're really well placed working with individuals, entrepreneurs, small to medium sized business owners, and just building your financial plan. And really, everybody's plan is different, and what is a plan? But effectively, we can show you that this is where you are today. This is where you could be in a few years, making use of all your different allowances. This is what could happen if you sell the business or do an EOT. And this is what level of income you could have for the remainder of your lifetime, to give you that clarity and confidence to know whether you should be establishing trusts or making regular gifts to the children, and also just ensuring that your assets are working for you. So, you know, we look at everything holistically and obviously lean on the specialists within the team. With regards to personal finances, Kate's obviously covered a lot. We also, at the core of any of our clients' financial plan, there is inevitably some form of investments. You know, holding cash is prudent for maybe 1 or 2 years, but with inflation just roaring away and being the small island nation which has no control over, you know, our energy prices, it's very important that your monies are working for you and also they remain tax efficient. So that's where typically we would consider investing clients' wealth. You know, a lot of people think, well, I'll approach retirement and I'll de-risk into cash. Well, actually, you've probably still got another 3 or 4 decades and you want that money to be working for you to provide an income and to gift, etc. So what did we see? Finally, there were changes to the individual savings allowances that are coming in 2027. And effectively, irrespective of how she worded it, the cash ISA allowance is reducing from 20,000 to 12,000 in 2027, and she did state that there'll be an additional £8,000 stocks and shares ISA allowance. But in reality, the cash ISA allowance will be 12,000, stocks and shares ISA allowance will be 20,000 from April 2027. Now, how they police that, we don't know, because ultimately anybody could open a stocks and shares ISA and just hold it in a cash fund. So, you know, it's the devil will be in the detail. I'm the first one on the panel to say that this year. But, you know, it just seems a bit nonsensical. Martin Lewis also did a big campaign about over 65s not wanting to take investment risk. So Rachel Reeves has obviously listened to him, and she said that over 65s will retain the full £20,000 ISA allowance. I mean, the government, and especially this government, are talking about improving education when it comes to investing, and they're going to lean on the banks to do that. I mean, as independent financial advisors, which we are, we know that the offerings provided by the banks are typically very expensive and not great, and as investors, the only things that you can control are the charges that you pay. So, you know, we're probably better placed to assist with that. Now, salary sacrifice pension schemes, this is another strange one. All of the tax measures that were introduced, aside from EOTs, which Nick will cover, they don't really seem to come into play until April 2028 or April 2029, where they're expecting to have this £22 billion wiggle room. So the salary sacrifice changes effectively mean that come April 2029, an individual will effectively be capped at £2,000 in terms of what they can salary sacrifice into their pension, which will be tax efficient for the employee and the employer. Anything over that amount will be treated as a standard, will be treated similarly to a standard employee contribution, and employer national insurance would be levied on that amount. So just to be clear then, salary sacrifice arrangements are a way of an individual giving up part of their salary for a pension contribution, which is treated as an employer pension contribution. And this is typically used where you've got high earners, employees that receive bonuses, that maybe take them over those, you know, the personal tax traps that we have in our landscape. So, for instance, if somebody's on 99,000 but they're getting a £10,000 bonus, if they were to receive that as salary, they might lose their 33 hours childcare. If somebody's earning 55,000 and getting a £10,000 bonus, they may lose, or their child benefit may become tapered away. So salary sacrifice has always given employees a real way and a tax efficient way of accumulating wealth by directing or giving up that salary into a workplace pension or into a pension of their choice. Now, as I said, that's not coming in until April 2029, and we're obviously going to have a general election around that time. So is it just a case of, you know, adding this and balancing the books and, you know, having the gilt markets look more favourable upon it? I think so. I don't really think that by the time that comes around, well, it might be quashed at that time. But, you know, that is an important lever that we use as financial planners working with, you know, entrepreneurs and, you know, employees to really ensure that they are making a tax efficient provision for their future. And instead of paying, you know, marginal rates of tax at 60% over 100,000, well, why don't, you know, you sacrifice some of it into a pension, get the employer NI saving as well, and, you know, become more tax efficient. Kate, I thought Kate was going to mention it, but I know she didn't. You know, the big rabbit out of the bag last year was, the big rabbit out of the bag that came last year was that pensions are going to be included inside of your estate for IHT purposes from April 2027. Now, the draft consultation has been released, and, you know, there's been a further technical consultation. There was some more updates that came yesterday to talk about how it's going to be administered, whereby the personal representatives will be given a 15-month extension in some cases. But what we're finding now is, as financial planners, the advice was typically always, well, spend what's inside of your estate first, so your unwrapped savings, your cash, your ISAs, your other areas, and then draw down on your pensions last and potentially leave those to your children. Now, we've seen some shocking scenarios of modelling this pre and post April 2027, and really seeing individuals who had barely any IHT liability could now have, you know, £1 million plus just due to this rule alone. And I suppose pensions were only ever introduced prior to 2015. You know, they were a retirement income planning vehicle and not necessarily in an inheritance tax mitigation vehicle. So, you know, the stance has changed on that. So there's a lot of planning there to be done where, you know, let's say if you've just sold a business or you've exited and you've got no other income, well, it then may be prudent to draw down up to the basic rate tax threshold from your pension and suffer 20% tax. And if it's not needed for income purposes, you could potentially gift it away as opposed to the fund suffering 40% at a later date. But it is completely different for everybody. And what I would say with financial planning is, and what we do, it's about having a number of multiple tax wrappers, so your ISAs, your investment account, your cash for day-to-day expenditure, your, you know, a pension, potentially an investment bond, that all have these differing allowances, which effectively means that you're saving over the years and funding these accounts so that when you do need to draw an income, your effective rate of tax in retirement is much lower than otherwise. Let's just say husband having £1 million in his pension, wife having nothing, and husband needing an income of 60k a year and then being in the realms of high rate tax. Mansion tax, what's that?
Just a question on pensions. All of the changes to pensions and the salary sacrifice around it,
Yep.
does there become a scenario where it no longer makes sense to invest in your pension?
No, it's yeah, it's amazing what people say and their salary depends on it, but no. Pensions still remain the most tax efficient way of accumulating wealth. What we haven't seen, and we haven't seen a lot in this budget, which is actually really good, for directors' pension contributions, they are still treated as an allowable business expense. And so making a pension contribution effectively reduces your corporation tax, is paid into your pension gross. The alternative is you pay yourself a salary, which is subject to employer and employee NI and income tax. If you're a business owner, you could pay a dividend and suffer corporation tax of between 19 to 25%. You've then got the increased rates of dividend tax, or you could pay a pension contribution, which not only saves the money corporation tax, but is paid gross into your pension. And then, irrespective of all the rumours and mainstream media, 25% still remains tax-free. So it is the best vehicle for extracting wealth if you are a business owner, and it still remains, you know, the best route of accumulating wealth as an employee. Just going back to the salary sacrifice thing, what they've effectively said is that £2,000 cap. You know, the way to think of it, that the employer national insurance burden it's going to be on the employer, because the cap means that it's only tax relievable up to 2,000. So that would mean an individual earning 40,000, there would be no issue. For a higher rate taxpayer as an individual, they would only have to pay an additional 2% employee NI on the sacrifice pension. So it's really individuals who potentially earn 50 grand and want to sacrifice down, that they would pay an additional 8% employee national insurance. So still remains really effective. Obviously the age that you can access your pension is increasing from 2028 from 55 to 57. But you know, if you're 45 to 50, don't think of it as a long-term savings vehicle. Think of it as the best short-term savings vehicle with the best tax breaks that you can get. And if you're a company owner, well, you're saving, you know, nobody likes to pay corp tax, and it's a lot nicer to have that money paid into your pension than paying it to the taxman at the end of the year. So yeah, long answer, but still very good. What hasn't changed? I mean, I just made some notes earlier, just go through them, because as we said, there was so much uncertainty, and normally when these the budgets are done, it's at the end of the party conference season. This time it was just dragged out, and I'm sure that because of the uncertainty and delays, it gave Rachel Reeves so much more wiggle room, because individuals were drawing down on pensions when it wasn't necessarily advisable to do so. But as Kate said, you know, the annual allowance, the amount that you can pay into pensions, it still remains at 60,000. If you've been a member of a registered pension scheme in previous years, then you can actually utilise your allowance from the previous 3 tax years. There are rules subject to tapering. We didn't see any changes to the VAT threshold. We knew what the changes were to CGT. There was no change to trust or IHT legislation. No restriction on investments that you can have on SIPs or onshore offshore bonds. So for investors, it was a fairly mundane budget, and really all the damage was done last year. That's what I would say. So yeah. Thank you, everyone. I'll hand you over to Nick, but again, any questions at the end, just let us know.
Thank you. I'm Nick Wright, Head of Corporate Tax at Jerams Miller, and apparently we do all the funky stuff. So I wasn't expecting anything really out of this budget, and from a corporate perspective. How many business owners have we got in the room rather than advisors? A decent amount. So what we had last year in the budget was this corporate tax roadmap, which was basically the government trying to show that stability was the main thing. That's what really matters. That's what we're aiming to have, so that we can encourage more investment from offshore, so we can encourage growth, because companies can come here and they can remain, they can be sure that the 25% tax rate isn't going to go up, and all of these types of things. So they can make their decisions to, you know, a fundamental change may be coming to the UK, and know that tax rates aren't going up and that type of thing. So for that reason, there really wasn't, in all the speculation ahead of this budget, there really wasn't an awful lot going on in the corporate tax world. Now, I know I'm head of corporate tax, but I often sort of approach this as more of a business tax type of thing. So the big thing, I think, over the periods, and Kate's really mentioned a lot of this already, is the pressure on business margins. And this has been added to in this budget. Things like the personal tax issues with dividend tax increases. Obviously, that means business owners are slightly worse off if they're taking a very common remuneration package of a low salary and high dividends. That minimum wage increase is going to put pressure on margins. This time last year we had the 15% NICs. So all of these types of things means that those margins are really squeezed even more. We have had two to my mind, really positive changes out of this budget, which is nice. We've got the tables on the screen there. I don't think I need to necessarily go through all of the conditions, but if you want to incentivise employees, and this really applies to key employees, not the whole workforce, but if you're looking to incentivise them and maybe you're thinking all of this extra, the NICs on pensions, and maybe pensions isn't the way to go, we now have this extension to EMI scheme. So an EMI scheme allows you to give share options to an employee. You don't have to give them shares, it's just the option to buy shares if they hit certain targets. And by giving them that option, it's kind of giving them the incentive rather than possibly increasing their salary, which maybe the business can't handle at this moment in time. And the changes that they've made are really quite significant. So the employee limit got doubled, the gross assets. So most businesses, I think, that I've talked about EMI fell within a lot of these anyway, but the fact that gross assets can now be 120 million instead of 30, that's a huge, huge change. And the other one is the maximum term. So it used to be that unless you exercised your options and took ownership of the shares within 10 years, that you'd lose all the tax advantages. They've extended that to 15 years. So this can be a longer term plan now, which again, coupled with the other points I've mentioned, could be really beneficial and make people look more at these types of schemes to incentivise their key staff and keep them on board for a long period of time. And what I was quite surprised, and Kate alluded to the idea of applying legislation retrospectively, what this will do is apply to all existing schemes. So if you've already got an EMI scheme in place, it's no longer a minimum 10 years, it's now 15 years. Although the one thing I would say is if you have already got one in place, most of the agreements actually say you will exercise within 10 years because of these rules. So you're going to have to go back and look at your EMI scheme documents and consider changing that. And I don't feel like changing it to 15 years is going to be a fundamental change that has tax issues, but that's something that we might need to consider a bit more. So EMI potentially is a really valuable thing that is now extended to even more companies, so that's a very positive change. And the other one, which I've always said for quite a long time now, that the issue we've always had is we've got these tax reliefs when you sell out, which is great. You've done really well over the course of your career. You've sold the business and you get business asset disposal relief. That's dwindled down from 10 million to 1, and now we're going to have an 18% tax rate. So there's not a huge amount of value, not what we used to have. But what we've struggled with, I think, in the legislation is actually having more tax incentives for growing business, for startups. And that's a lot of what the corporate tax roadmap talks about, stability and growth and things. So this EIS change is another big one. So EIS is where you can, rather than going out and getting bank funding, you can go to private investors. You might know them. There's also people out there who can raise funds sort of through platforms. But you can go out and get private investment. The investors get a huge tax release. EIS, for instance, you get a 30% income tax relief, and all of the gains are exempt at the end of the process. But there was always restrictions on these. Now they've, again, like EMI, they've really extended these schemes. So it used to be that there's a £5 million limit. Now there's 10. Lifetime company limit of 12. They've doubled it to 24. So a lot more investment can now be raised through this type of tax advantage scheme, which again, given the idea that this is all about growth and what Chaz was saying at the start about that those graphs came down because of the growth more than anything, I think that's a really valuable change for companies. And the gross assets test has doubled as well. So really positive that. Now, anyone thinking of selling to an EOT might be quite disappointed though in this budget, because they've restricted what a relief of 100% capital gains tax to half of that. So an EOT, you sell to a trust set up for the benefit of your employees and you pay no tax whatsoever. There's certain conditions applying, but we've had this legislation since 2014. They didn't touch it at all for 10 years. Last year they made a few changes which weren't really fundamental. It was just really to stop some of the tax avoidance that was going on around these schemes. whereas now they've massively restricted it. So you used to be able to sell to a EOT 100% of your business, say for 10 million quid, and you'd pay no tax. So a huge benefit considering 24% CGT, to £2.4 million in capital gains tax saved. Now only half of the gain is relieved, so actually you'd still going to pay 1.2 million. So I mean, it's still a huge benefit, and that we had someone complete on the 25th of November their EOT. This applies from yesterday. So they sold for just over 10 million. So they've literally saved themselves about £1.5 million in tax by being quite pushy and insisting that all us advisors get things done before the budget, even though most of us weren't really expecting anything. So good on them for pushing that ahead. But I do know that there was one EOT completed at 10 a.m. yesterday, and therefore has cost themselves a few million quid. So, you know, that's a very fundamental change. But if you flip it on its head and think, if we never had an EOT relief and they brought this in yesterday saying you can have half your gain completely tax-free, we'd all be jumping up and down saying that what a great relief this is. So, yes, it's a restriction, and actually they are. I don't personally think EOTs are a huge amount, so it's probably not a huge revenue raiser. But from reading what they put out in the budget, it's still costing them a lot more than they were expecting. So that's why they've made the change. So EOT is still a very valuable succession planning tool if you're looking to sell your business, but it's not what it was 2 days ago. Let's put it that way. And that's really all I have to say about corporation tax or business taxes generally. So, yeah, a fairly, not a very big budget from my side of things. There are a few little techie bits if anyone's interested in those, but I won't bore most of you with that. And so, yeah, I think kind of like UK, I think there's not a huge amount that we need to say is fundamental. I just think it's these small changes over time, like the fiscal drag and all of those things, that is squeezing those margins and causing businesses to be a little bit more worse off than they were. But other than that, I guess it's just open the floor to questions, really.
One thing we haven't talked about is we were talking yesterday about whether or not you're still better off having a dividend rather than a salary, because we get asked this every time dividend rates change. People think, oh, shall I flick to a salary? Because it is still better, isn't it? Up to a certain point. So in most circumstances, you are still better off having a dividend.
So I did this little graph yesterday. So the graph I used to have was if you take his salary of 12,500 and the rest as dividends, if you're taking between 50 and 100,000 out of the company, you're probably going to save yourself about £4,000 in tax by structuring it that way. And then as you go up the salary levels from 100, the graph goes down and down and down. By the time you're at 500,000, if you're lucky enough to be taking 500,000 out a year, you're better off taking a salary rather than that salary dividend structure. Now, instead of about 4,000 at the 50 to 100,000 threshold, it's more like 3. So you're going to be about £1,000 worse off, but still better. It's still three grand better off by taking that structure. But that graph now crosses the line at about 300,000. So a lot more, you know, if you're on, say, taking a lot of money out of the company above 300,000, you definitely want to be thinking about just taking salary instead of dividends.
There are some circumstances where a salary, if you're claiming R&D relief, if you're over retirement age and you're losing the employee nick, it could be worth looking at salary, but by and large...
My graph makes a huge amount of assumptions.
By and large, most people are still better off before we get inundated with people saying, shall I swap to a salary? Most of the time, it's still better to take a dividend. So it's just worth mentioning.
If you're a sole trade, not a sole trader or someone using a personal service company, actually you've got to take into account the compliance costs of keeping that company open as well.
I think someone mentioned that about sort of, IR35 and all of that. Like, actually, is it if you're making the decision to go from a sole trader or a partnership to a company, those decisions might be because of the compliance costs a bit more.
Yeah. And MTD, I mean, we haven't really talked about MTD, but MTD for income tax was due to come in April 26. It's been due to come in for about 5 years now. I've been crossing my fingers that it would keep getting deferred until I possibly retired, but sadly not. It is coming in April 26. So that is individuals, landlords and sole traders are all getting pulled into this MTD bracket, which is where you're going to have to do the quarterly reporting on software, etc. That is quite big. What we are looking at is partnerships are excluded at the moment. So anyone that's a sole trader, is it worth actually converting to a partnership? If you've got a spouse or someone that you can bring in with a small percentage, it could be worth doing that just to avoid the administration headache. I know it's been worked on within the office. That administration headache, I don't think anyone in the UK has got it all worked out right now, how that's going to look and what's going to happen. So we are working on it in the background, but that's going to be quite a big change for a lot of people, I think, where you're a landlord or a sole trader. And again, landlords, you know, you've lost your tax breaks, you've lost capital gains breaks. Actually, you're going to have to start reporting quarterly. It's only a matter of time before that quarterly reporting kicks in with quarterly payments, which is clearly where they're going with it. Is it that attractive if you're investing a lot of time in it? Is it something that you want to carry on doing? Or actually, is it worth considering? Do you sell these properties and perhaps speak to someone like Jamie about how that money can work for you better in the background and give you a bit less of a headache?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, you know, bricks and mortar for you know, previous generations has been the golden asset class. Interest rates have been, you know, low since the global financial crisis, which has meant property prices have appreciated. You've had a good yield. Now, if you actually take the yield that you're getting into account, minus any management fees, the costs, the compliance, you know, the hassle factor, the tax, in reality, what are you ending up with? And if, you know, in the budget yesterday, they made assumptions about interest rates being 5% in 2029 now. Who knows what will happen there, but there is a case, you know, especially when it comes to retirement, that diversification is key. And it's not like if you've got a couple of properties, you can't just go and rip the bifolds out or take the conservatory down if you want to raise 50 grand for next year's income. Everything we do is fully flexible, it's fully liquid, monthly, you know, direct debits without the tenancy hassle. So we've definitely seen a lot of property portfolio landlords come to us and restructuring the affairs. Because, you know, at the end of the day, typically if you own one asset, it's not diversified. Everything we do, thousands of underlying holdings globally, not just in the UK, a number of different assets. So it's just a much more prudent way to invest. But at the same time, some people just like the fact that they can look at it and it's there.